Yeah, screen share.
Okay. When Greg first asked me to do this, I sort of hesitated because there's so many other people like Bob and Conrad and others who know CAC much better than I do. But when I understood part of it was talking about common mistakes, then I understood why my name sort of showed up at the top of the list here. Because I've made a number of them, and unfortunately, I've made some of them several times. So when we get to that part, I hope there's a little bit of audience participation from some of the other CAC regulars, because my advice is obviously slanted from my personal experience and preferences. This is a little outline. Is the screen sharing working for everybody okay? Can everybody see the screen share?
Looks good.
Okay, let me zoom it so it's full screen. We're going to do a quick overview of what's down at CAC and what the site's like, talk about information for first-time visitors, and to be honest, almost all of that is pulled from the TAAA website on the Chiricahua Astronomy Complex. It's all out there, but I've maybe compiled it in a little bit different format and made it easy to find. And then the last three bullets, we're talking about what you need to bring to enjoy your time down there, where you can screw it up, and some ideas on how to avoid screwing it up. The first thing I'd like to start with is this overview. It's a drone photo that Ed Foley took. I'm going to enlarge it a little bit because you don't need the script there. And it gives you a really nice sort of bird's eye view of what's down there. Entry gate is at the left. You've got a gravel roadway here. You've got parking area for RVs. You've got 5 new member observatories, which the last time I was there in the spring, they just had the foundations down for those. So those are up and roofed over, which is great to see. Of particular interest, and we'll come back to these are what are called the public pads, these 10 pads, but in TAAA parlance, the public pads are for our members. You reserve those for however many nights you want to use them on the nights you come down. In TAAA lingo, the member pads are the ones that have been leased by members for their private use. Now, when the members are not using them on a particular weekend, those kind of become available as some overflow space that the site manager can, dedicate. If we have more than 10 users of the public pads, we can spill into some of those. You'll see a couple big containers here for storing equipment on site. Can anybody see my arrow pointer? Should I make that bigger? Do you see where I'm? Okay. This little brown roofed building is both 2 restrooms, a shower room, and a little utility room with a water heater for the showers, but it also has a small microwave. So if you need to heat up something in the middle of the night, it's convenient. This ramada is a nice shade structure with 4 picnic tables in it. And then we start to get to the heart of some of the facilities that make this such a good site. This is the Reynolds Mitchell Observatory, which has the 40-inch telescope, and it also has a 9-inch folded refractor, and they're both relatively spectacular. The 40-inch lives in a shed and rolls out. The 9-inch shed rolls off. And speaking of roll off, the other centerpiece there is a 14-inch Celestron in a roll-off roof, the Wally Rogers Observatory. What's new here in just the past year or two are these 2 buildings. One is fully sleeping rooms. The other is part sleeping rooms and part classroom for educational and other uses. They come with restrooms. They come with shower. They come with sort of the same minimal kitchen facilities, a microwave and refrigerator that you see in the warm room for the RMO. So with that as an overview of the site, I'm going to back up a step and go to a ground tour that was filmed back in 2020. And some of it is a little bit out of date, but this is how you're going to see CAC when you first drive in. So is that video showing up okay for everybody? I haven't started it yet. I've just got it on play mode. Whoops. What happened to my video? Come back. There we go. I'm going to make this full screen if I can.
Kevin, I think we're still seeing the blue slide.
Really? Okay, then let me stop that share. It hasn't shifted over to my current screen. So let me restart the share and pick the video. I'll restart it for everybody. Can you see it now?
There you go.
Okay. It's not, the site is not advertised with a nice flashing neon sign. It's not Las Vegas. So the sign's a little subtle and you have to follow the instructions to make sure you're making the right turns. But this is a nice, ground level view of what you're going to see when you pull in. This is that utility building I was talking about with 2 restrooms, the hot water heater room, and a shower on the opposite side. This field full of weeds covers what is the septic field for the site. Those weeds have all been cleared through a lot of labor, hard labor by people, particularly Susan, who's spent countless hours pulling and clearing those weeds. This is the control room for the RMO, and to the right of it is the shed where the 40-inch is stored. Further right is the smaller shed for the 9-inch folded refractor. That's the 40-inch monster rolled with the shed rolled out of the shed and shed rolled off, excuse me. And it's fun to look at that and some of your favorite objects. I love that because I'm a refractor guy, and that's spectacular on smaller objects and on planets. The Wally Roger Observatory has the Celestron 14 sitting on an astrophysics mount. That one is one you can get trained to operate yourself. The 40-inch and the 9-inch folded refractor have a number of certified operators, and CAC would always like to have a few more certified operators, but they obviously don't let anybody use scopes that size. The same is true with the 14-inch. You do need to be trained in how to operate the mount and the scope. This is the view from behind the roll-off rails, looking at what are called the observing pads open to the members. You don't have to lease these. You just reserve these in advance of the time you want to come down. Further back, these are the leased member pads. And once you lease that, you sort of, I don't know what the term of the lease is, Conrad. Do you know? Anybody? I don't know how long those leases run for.
Well, and as long as we want them, we pay one price, and then if we decide to end the lease, then we get reimbursed a certain percentage.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
There's a yearly charge, so I guess you'd have to say it was on a yearly basis.
Well, their maintenance, there's maintenance for $120 a year or $200 a year, but that's all because of maintenance and weed clearing and stuff like that. But the lease was like about $2,600 up front.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. And that's a view of the picnic ramada, which on sunny days is a lifesaver because you cannot spend all day out in the sun down there. And these are memorials to the people who have, contributed, been longtime members in memory of people who have been part of the astronomy community here for a long time. This is a nice touch. That's the little utility building I was talking about. And because this is 2020, it will not show you those two new dormitory and classroom buildings. Those did not exist back in 2020. I'll stop that one. I'll stop the screen share for the moment, and then I'm going to reactivate screen share with a different view that's more current. And I want to end on one note, though, from that last image. Those of us who are either freezing our rears off on a cold night or sweltering on a hot day really hate those people in the RVs who are sitting there in climate-controlled comfort. They're not exactly roughing it. So let me reactivate screen share and we'll go to a different, whoops, hold one. I have to change. It's not coming up right here. Oh, because I was in full screen, that's why. Okay, reactivate screen share, pick the one I want. This is a drone flyover from this spring, and it's another really nice view of the site. You can, this is the sign for TAAA CAC. You can see it's not a glaringly obvious sign. But once you get in the vicinity, you'll start to see the roofs of some of the buildings here. This is that weed field that covers the septic field, and it's now sort of the camping area. And I will say, from seeing as that was my tent on that visit, do not set up your tent too close to the edge with the rocks, because somebody pulling out in the dark can get awfully close to your tent setup. This is the RV parking area. And these are those 5 new member observatories, which back in the spring just had the foundations laid. They weren't built or roofed over yet. I'm starting to become a convert of drone photography because it's so good for giving you a nice 3D sense of a place that you don't get from just a straight down photo or a ground view. These are people using those leased member pads in the back. This is the RMO with the 14-inch Celestron with the roof rolled off. I'm going to stop it right here. These are the 10 again, what they're called public pads. They're available for member use on a reservation basis. And in fact, that's probably me getting ready to make the mistake I made on that trip, which we'll talk about later. So I'll keep going. A couple of those construction containers that are used for storage of equipment down at the site. A big circular pad, which could be used for one of the club's big Dobsonians. And then in the background, you can see the Chiricahuas. You can see these 2 new buildings, which really changed the game down at CAC for when you're visiting for several nights. Stuff you're seeing several times now: the picnic ramada, the utility building with the restrooms and the shower, the control room for the RMO, the 40 inches out, the 9-inch folded refractors out. And as I understand that there's going to be 3 scopes set up here with roll-off sheds protecting them. Bernie or Conrad or somebody else may know the current status of those and whether those are going to be available for general member use or just kind of educational get-togethers.
There's going to be 4 scopes, not 3.
Oh, okay.
1 Dob, the other 3 are
SCTs?
SCTs. I'm trying to think back. There's an 9 1/4 Celestron, a 11-inch Celestron, and a Mead. I think it's a 12-inch Mead, and the furthest one. And that's only showing 1 of the sheds completed. Now 3 of the sheds are completed, and the scopes are mounted on the piers already.
Fantastic. You guys made a lot of progress since I was down there in April or May then. Here's Doug wheeling a scope from his RV out to one of the public pads. So anyhow, that should give any new visitors a pretty good overview of what the site looks like. Let me go back to, I think I have to stop screen sharing and then restart it with a different choice of what I'm sharing here. Stop share and get back to the presentation. My favorite choice. Okay, so you've seen the overview. These are important links. This, if you want to rewatch those 2 videos that we just watched, we've talked about some of the new changes down there. A couple important things that I haven't mentioned yet. There are now EV charging stations at several locations. And thanks to the efforts of Bob Rose and some other people, it's far, far better Wi-Fi coverage over the site than we had before. And if you haven't heard through the grapevine, there is a new 32-inch scope coming to CAC soon. For first-time visitors, like I said at the beginning, I drew a lot of this information from what's already posted up on the website. You don't have to hunt very far for it. This is the main link for CAC, and this is the link that actually address questions that are likely to come up from first-time users. CAC tends to have the most activity for both imagers and visual observers, obviously around new moons. Because some poor souls are still working. We tend to pick the weekend closest to the new moon. Sometimes it falls precisely on the Saturday or Sunday. Sometimes it doesn't, but we get pretty close. You want to visit during those times to start with. There's an open house coming up in November. That's open to, that may be fairly busy. We hope it's fairly busy. We want people to see, how the site's been improved and see how good the skies are down there. And we have our fingers crossed we'll have clear skies. But the other alternative are the other new moon weekends. Those are all posted on this first CAC website. And those are generally considered a hosted weekend where the site is open. There's an on-site host. And 1 or more of the big scopes are up and running for viewing. If you want to visit it the other 3 weeks of the month when it's not around a new moon, there is a training program, so you're certified to open and close the site. That's the gate into the site. But then all the details of turning on power for the various facilities. I can't emphasize enough the last bullet, make reservations. And that's not just for the convenience of the CAC manager, it's for your convenience as well. Like I mentioned before, if there is overflow and there's more demand than the 10 public pads can handle, then the CAC manager can reach out to the members with those lease pads and find out if they're going to be using those on those particular crowded nights. But it's really helpful for them to know who's on site and for how many nights. Part of the reservation system is asking whether you're a visual observer, whether you're an imager, whether you're staying for more than one night, and whether you're camping, parking an RV, sleeping on a cot in the RMO warm room, or wanting to reserve a dorm room in one of the two new buildings. So the reservation system is, I think, a key to making this work smoothly. And I have not had any problems with using it. So what do you need to bring to have a good time down there? Well, in a sense, you don't have to bring anything but yourself, because if you come on an open house weekend or a hosted weekend, you can just observe through the club scopes that are up and running. The people who are up either doing imaging or visual on the member pads are happy to show you what they're looking at. And it's just a good way to get a general feel for what's down there. You don't have to stay all night, but we'll get to that. There's a point about that we'll get to a little later. So obviously, if you're coming with your own equipment, bring all of that. Bring everything you need to function in the field. One of the beauties of the member pads, which are 12 by 12 pads, is they're all come with electrical power. So you don't have to run off battery. You do have to bring a short extension cord with multiple outlets to get, those outlets to under the base of your scope's mount. And you need whatever particular power supplies your mount and your camera requires. That's obviously, CAC's obviously not providing that. There's sort of a standardization, but it hasn't standardized down to one plug system. So make sure you bring those. I speak from experience for forgetting those one time. The other things that make it a useful visit from an observing or imaging perspective: a small table for your laptop, your tablet, your star charts, and a comfortable sort of camping folding chair there. Some people bring sort of the hard auditorium chairs, and those work, but I think most people wind up with those sort of camping versions of a director's chair style with a fabric seat and a fabric back. Absolutely bring red light, either a headlamp or a flashlight. But if you stay there long enough on any given evening, particularly when the Milky Way's up, you don't need a light. It's bright enough that you will, and your eyes are dark adapted enough, you'll navigate easily to the restroom and back, or to the warm room and back, without even having to use your red light. Bring whatever star atlas or planetarium program you're used to for finding things. Absolutely, when you're imaging, bring your laptop, bring your tablet. I didn't do this, but I know somebody else who forgot both of those and was left running his imaging off a cell phone. And that's doable, but not ideal. As I mentioned, the short extension cord's good. If you're staying multiple days and nights, bring a cover for the daytime. Keeps the sun off your scope and off your mount. And if bad weather blows through, keeps everything dry. Some people don't include the last item. I do. I like duct tape to tape down that little extension cord so I'm not tripping over it in the dark. And I like painter's tape for everything else because it's so easily removable. One of the things I've gotten in the habit of doing is noting the focus point on a given night, and then the next night seeing how far off it changes from that focus point. And I can just pencil it in on a piece of painter's tape on the focuser. Everybody, this is a place where I'd like the experienced CAC people to start chiming in, because everybody has their own little favorite things that make for a better observing or imaging experience. In the excuse me, in the warm room for the RMO, there's a refrigerator with a freezer, standard size refrigerator, standard size top mounted freezer, so it's not huge. There's a microwave, and on the weekends when it's staffed, there's usually a hot water pot running. And there's tea, there's cocoa, there's even sugar-free cocoa. Sometimes if we're good, there's snacks. Most people bring either frozen food that they can reheat in a microwave, or they bring leftovers from home in, the little plastic or glass containers that just need refrigerate, and you can reheat those in the microwave. Some of the weekends, depending on the weather, and it's typically during the open house and hosted weekends, the grill is up and available if you wanted to bring Polish sausage or bratwurst or a steak or something. But check on that in advance, because that's not the case on every new moon weekend that the grill's available. There's a small kind of all-purpose grocery store and a couple restaurants within a 20 or 30-minute drive. And if you're staying multiple days, it's good to get off the site and not eat, frozen TV dinners. It's good to patronize those local businesses, so we're a good neighbor to the community. But I've learned the hard way that you cannot believe what those restaurants say on their websites. Always call them, because business down there is very seasonal. And surprisingly, they're busiest in the winter because the cranes come to a large wetland area south of CAC. About a half hour south of CAC, not all that close, but that tends to perk up the restaurants and the little hotels and things like that. As it gets toward the hot summer months and the snowbirds have left, a lot of those restaurants that claim they're open 7 days a week are in fact not open 7 days a week. Personal comfort down there. The first bullet I think is important. Do not go by the forecast low temperature. Remember, you're sitting out there under a very open, dark sky, and you are radiating heat. And if you're sitting there observing or you're sitting there imaging, you're not generating much heat yourself. So my rule of thumb has been bring clothes that cover at least another 25 degrees down. As an example, I used to sleep on a cot next to the scope at night while it was imaging, and wake up every hour or two and make sure it was still guiding, etc. And I brought my 0-degree down bag for a night that got no colder than 30 degrees. Now, some people, some images are more sophisticated than I am. They have the automation down, and once they sort of set up the imaging program, they're comfortable going inside and staying warm or sleeping. But a lot of people like to stay outside and monitor the data as it's coming in. And if you're a visual observer, yeah, you're out there. So dress warmer than you think you would need to. I mentioned before bringing some sort of folding camp chair for sitting at your little observing table. The second bullet's personal for me because I have a bad back, but I have trouble sitting upright all day long. So in the cases where it's bad weather, in the cases where it's beautiful weather and it's sunny, but you want to get out of the sun, I tend to bring one of those 0G recliners. I have one of those Nemo Stargazer lounge chairs, something where I'm sort of leaning back and the feet are up. And I think that's probably true in the winter months where we have some gorgeous skies out there. We don't necessarily have the Milky Way, but Ryan feels like you could reach out and touch it. There are times it's cold and you're going to be sitting inside somewhere, and you want to be sitting on a folding metal chair or something more comfortable. I would bring a Yeti or some version of an insulated mug or a thermos bottle for nighttime. In warmer weather, it keeps your drink cold, but particularly in cold weather, you can go into the warm room, fill it up with your favorite warm beverage, and go back out there, and that'll keep it warm for another 2 hours until you need a refill. The mattresses in the bunk beds that are in, not all of them are bunk beds. Some of them are single level. Some of them are bunk bed style with 2 levels. The mattresses are what they call institutional mattresses, which means they're pretty darn sturdy. It also means they're pretty darn firm. So my personal recommendation is to bring some sort of inflatable pad as an extra layer of cushioning between yourself and the prison mattress. And lastly, whether you're sleeping outside, sleeping in a tent, sleeping in one of the dorm rooms, recognize everybody else is likely on a different schedule than you are. The last time I was there, and we sort of were, some of us were guinea pigs to see how the beds in the dorm rooms worked out. I stayed up all night and then slept from about 5:30 a.m. till about 11. But at the same time, I was trying to do that, and I had the shade down. The eye mask helped because enough bright sunlight leaks through behind the shade that the room gets pretty bright. And as you can imagine, people who are on a different schedule are coming and going through those facilities. The outer doors close firmly, which means they make a little noise when they close. So earplugs are also useful if you want to get, catch up on your sleep. In the old days, pre this year, I would, like I said, try to sleep, catnap outside and try to get enough sleep by the scope. As soon as the sun came up, it was too bright, and as you know, it warms up like 30 degrees at that first hour. So it got too warm. So I ate any more than 3 nights and I ran a real sleep deficit. I tried tenting and sort of had the same experience. Having the dorm rooms was a game changer for me because I could stay up all night and image and then get 5 or 6 hours of solid sleep in the dorm room. But the eye mask and the earplugs and the inflatable foam pad were sort of critical to making that work. So what can go wrong with a CAC visit? And I've done most of these, but not all these. I have not done the first one yet, but I know a number of other people who have. And if you don't bring your counterweights and you have an EQ mount, you are royally screwed. It's strange, but manufacturers have not sort of standardized on a diameter for the shaft. And so there's some makeshift things that are possible, but ideally you want to have your own counterweights. Number 2, I showed up with everything but the power supplies. Fortunately, neighboring people had spares and that saved the visit for me. But the next slide, we'll get to some techniques on how you don't do stupid things like I did. Cables everybody's got a preferred setup for imaging, a preferred length of cables. There's unique connectors, whatever that funky thing is called, that goes on the back of the ZWO cameras. But you can forget that unique cable, but cables fail. You would think something so simple would not go wrong, but in fact, it'll work last month, and the next time you take it out of the case and plug it in, for some reason it doesn't. So bring spares on the cables. They're cheap. As I mentioned before, a laptop or tablet is critical. I have driven down there part way and realized I didn't have the tablet in the car and had to turn around to go get it. An observing table and chair is necessary. I have not forgotten both, but I have forgotten a chair. And Bob Rose, I think, bailed me out that time with an extra chair he had in his trailer. If you're a visual observer, forgetting your eyepiece or diagonal might be a showstopper, but I suspect there's enough things, and those sizes are so standardized that you can beg and borrow something to make it through. This next one is not something that ruins the visit for yourself, but can ruin it for other people. There's people who come down and stay till 11 or 12 or 10 and then drive back home to Tucson. And please do the courtesy of notifying the CAC host and the fellow imagers on those public pads when you're about to leave, because with most modern cars, you have to have your foot on the brake pedal to start it, and that means the brake lights come on, and if somebody's doing a deep sky imaging run, that can ruin it. If we know it's coming, everybody can sort of adapt to it. And the last thing is, some people are just in the neighborhood and want to check out CAC, but more often than not, that site's locked and all you'll see is that entry gate, a closed entry gate. You really won't be able to get in and see much of anything. So a couple ideas on how you can avoid making some of those mistakes. What I sense is probably the most common solution is number one, which is get a comprehensive checklist and follow it religiously. I admire the people who can do that. I, unfortunately, am not one of those. It's just not in my DNA. Another common strategy is to keep all the stuff for a CAC visit, whether you're image or visual, together in one pile, one part of your house. Cover it with a tarp or a blanket if you need to, but it all stays together. That set of equipment and cables and power supplies and everything, and camping chair and everything else moves kind of as a unit from home to CAC and back to home. What I've started to do, even though I've yet to forget them, is to just leave the counterweights under the passenger seat in the vehicle. I got a small scope. The weights aren't that heavy, and at least that way I always know where they are. The rest of my stuff stays inside the house in the closet, but I'm always fearful I'm going to drop a counterweight on a tile floor and crack a tile. So the counterweights live in the garage, or they used to. They now live in the RAV4. Number 4 is something I have done before and I will probably continue to do, which is the night before I'm going to go down to CAC, set up everything, make sure it's all working, make sure I have all the bits and pieces, and, do a short half hour, shut it down, and the next morning it goes straight from the backyard into the vehicle. Where I went wrong the last time was that I was too lazy to dig out the long extension cord to power it from AC power. And I said, that's no big deal. I got one of those small batteries. I'll run it off the cigarette lighter adapter, into the 12-volt plug for the camera and the mount. Worked fine. But that's, unfortunately, I did not bring the regular AC power supplies, because when I set up at home for sort of a dry run, I did not set up exactly the way I would be operating down at CAC. So for number 4 to work, you kind of have to mirror exactly your setup at CAC down to your electrical supply and everything else. The 5th one is something I've started to do, and maybe it only works for me because I've got relatively small refractors, is I decided that the weight of the power supply, the weight of an ASI Air, the weight of the cables for all that stuff is really pretty minimal. And so I've got cases where all of those little accessories can now live in the same case as the imaging scope. I keep everything attached. The camera stays attached to the flattener, which stays attached to the focuser. And I kind of do the equivalent with the mount. It's got a separate case for the mount head, power supply, and the cables will live in that case. And the thing I want to end on, and it's not just for yourself, it always bring spares. I've had power supply fail. I've had an astrophysics power cable fail, which you wouldn't think would happen, but stuff does go wrong. Most of these accessories are not very expensive, so it always pays to bring a spare, but it's not just for you. Having spares can save the experience for one of your neighbors. This is one of the beauties of CAC, as the sun goes down and somebody gets ready to power up and do polar alignment, you'll hear an, oh crap, I forgot this. Does anybody have this cable? And 95% of the time, somebody else has brought a spare that can save the day for you. So do the same for them the next time you visit. That's all I have. I'm happy to entertain any questions, but I suspect a lot of the other members are the people who are going to be able to answer those better than I can. And thank you for all the people who have lent me stuff in the dark of night when I forgot something, because I really appreciate. One tip: almost all imaging cables are black. If somebody loans you one at 10 p.m., put a little piece of painter's tape around it, so in the morning you know which one it was you borrowed and who it goes to. Because in the light of day, you've got a handful of black cables and you're trying to sort out who lent you what.
Great, Kevin. Thank you. So here's a question. How do you keep the screen of your tablet or iPad or laptop from shedding bright light that ruins everyone's night vision?
I have a problem with, I'm using an ASI Air, and the problem is this, they've got a nice graphic display that lets you control the process. If you put a red acetate over it, unfortunately, a lot of the critical data is in a bright kind of lime green, and the red acetate makes that lime green disappear. There's a couple strategies, and people are courteous where when you saw the arrangement of those public pads, you can angle your screen away from your neighbor so it's not disturbing them. I have a little one of those folding plastic crates that if it becomes a problem, it's a folding plastic crate that carries all the accessories. If it becomes a problem, I can park the tablet in that, and it shields the light from going much of anywhere but toward me.
Okay.
That really hasn't been much of a problem. Something I'm a little worried about, maybe this is just me. A lot of us who are doing imaging are probably having our scopes at a lower height above the ground than we used to. You don't need that scope up at 6 feet. Some of the tripods, like what they sell with the AM5, the little strain wave mount, is only 40 inches tall. And that means, your objective lens isn't that far off the ground. And so when people are walking by with a red headlamp on, there's a little bit of stray light coming from the headlamps. Probably you don't have a good enough discipline to make sure that's pointed down and not forward. But a lot of times, the nights down there are clear enough that you really don't necessarily need that lamp unless you've dropped a black cable on the ground or something. There's times we get sloppy on light discipline. Somebody who pulls out at 11 p.m. and hasn't told the imagers that they're about to do that, their vehicle's probably followed by a few curse words. I remember a time this past year, we had some new members down there. They were just doing visuals, but once they got set up, about an hour in, they started taking selfies of the group with their scope, with the flash activated. Okay. You think, what were you thinking? But people are generally polite. I mean, it's a good group.
Kevin, you didn't mention it, and it isn't particularly astronomically related, but one thing to keep in mind while out there is the critters that we have in the area. Bob Rose can probably attest to an instance where a rattlesnake came right onto his pad.
I haven't heard that story yet, Bob. Tell us.
Yeah, well, it started with Jim. It was about evening. Had gotten dark. He'd taken a shower, and when he came out, it was dark. And he tried to make it back over to his RV in the dark without a flashlight, and he encountered the rattlesnake. He screamed and hollered, and I went over there, and there was the rat. Didn't get him. He was really close to it, though.
Wow.
And then we left it be. Well, that thing went over and circled somewhere out into the lot and came about the time I was finishing my alignment. I heard him when he crawled over the wheel stop coming under my pickup truck. I heard a couple of clicks from his rattles. And so I turned the red flashlight on. Now I couldn't really see him. And then I went ahead and flipped it on white. And there he was, straight to the pad, straight under my table, and went right under my telescope. And I got video to prove it. And it was later identified. John said it was a Mojave. I just thought it was a regular old rattlesnake, but
Yeah.
He said it was a Mojave.
Must be your animal magnetism.
You're doing a good selling job.
There's the only thing, my only experience, one occasion there were some ants down, coming off the gravel onto the pad, and that was a time when it wasn't all that busy, so I just shifted pads at that point. But yeah, you got to be sort of critter aware. You're out in the desert at night, and the heat may attract things.
Hi, this is Dave. I have a question. I use the ASI Air, and I use program mode a lot at night. So when I'm shooting from my backyard patio, I'll just get it polar aligned. I'll set it up for my target, do all my calibrations for focus and guiding. And then once I start imaging and I know I'm getting some decent images, I go to sleep and, get up in the morning and it's gone down to the home position and it's back. So just kind of curious, what's the Wi-Fi range now if I were to set it up and then let's say go back to a sleeping quarter or something like that, or to the warming house and just watch it from there as opposed to having to be right next to my rig?
Bob's probably the best guy to answer that question, but it's pretty long now. I don't know whether it reaches into the dorm buildings or not.
It does. You can just about image, have connectivity just about anywhere there's gravel.
Well, that's good to know because I use station mode and I use Wi-Fi from my house to communicate. So I'll just keep the phone on all night, and then when I get up in the morning, I'll check to make sure everything worked okay. But typically, I don't have any problems in program mode.
Right.
Yeah, I've
You
just
would,
had personal experiences where it seems like there's a proximity sensor, and I get about 20 feet away from the scope to go get hot chocolate, and something, it loses the guiding or something weird goes on. So it's just kind of I don't know. And I have to say, the skies are so nice there. That's why I like having a comfortable chair where you can just sort of lean back. Yeah, if you doze off, that's fine. If you're awake and you're just appreciating being out there under skies like that, I don't mind staying up all night. But at some point, I have to catch up on sleep. And the dorm rooms make that possible in a way that wasn't possible before they were built.
yeah, what you have to do is connect all your devices to the CAC network. And then once it's done that, then it covers the grounds pretty good. That was the whole idea of putting in this extensive network so people could utilize, their scopes being, 500 feet away and still could control them.
There was one instance, it wasn't the fault of CAC. I think it was a particular ASI air update, but when the range wasn't so big, so extensive, when it lost connection with the ASI, your ASI air, it would bounce to the CAC network. And then when it tried to reconnect, we had an instance of crosstalk where it reconnected to somebody else's mount, which was fortunately, it could have led to disaster, but he was trying to focus and wondering why it wasn't focusing. And I was trying to move and wondering why it wasn't moving. And so we finally figured out we were connected to each other's ASI airs. But that seems to have been resolved by ZWO. I haven't experienced that lately.
Hey, Kevin, I know you covered this. This is Alan.
Yeah.
But one thing I think is really important is it gets cold down there, and it gets cold fast. So you can go down there and you get there at 4 o'clock and it's 90 degrees out, and you say, "There's no way it's getting cold tonight." It will.
Yep.
It gets cold fast. I mean, as soon as the sun goes down, the temperature probably drops 25 degrees. And if you're not prepared, you're going to freeze your butt off.
Yeah.
I mean, thank God for the warm room. It's a lifesaver, but you still have to go outside, and it does get cold really fast. It can really catch you off guard.
Oh, the first couple times I was down there and people were, I think I joined TAAA in September. So my visits were in the fall and winter, and people were wearing full snowmobile suits with a down jacket over those. And I'm thinking, what's going on? Well, the first night or two, you understand really quickly what's going on. Yeah, Alan's right. You can take a lot of breaks to warm up. And that's kind of what you have to do. But the other strategy is bring warm enough clothes that you're comfortable sitting out there and you're not freezing. I've been down there and gotten snowed on. I mean, that's probably the other thing we didn't talk enough about is you need sun protection for your gear during the nice, clear, sunny days. You need protection from precipitation if you happen to be staying multiple days and some front moves through. And there's times down there, and this was true this past spring, it would seem to get windy in the afternoon. You'd see little dust devils in the neighborhood, and then it would die down around sunset. but some good protection so your optics don't get all covered with dust is it's worthwhile to have a
I'd
good
like
scope
to add
cover.
something. I'd like
Yeah.
to add something to that. You can get big dust covers that are made for different telescope sizes. You can get them from Orion, and you can get them from Astro Systems.
Yeah, I've got one of those heavy duty 365 covers from whoever it is that make Telegizmos is the brand, and
Yeah.
it's lasted a good 10 years. Eventually, it's the outside sort of a heavy duty coated nylon. The inside has a reflective mylar, and my only experience was eventually that aluminized mylar started to flake a bit. And that's not surprising because you're dragging it over all those sharp edges with the finder scope screws.
Mine doesn't have Mylar on the inside. I don't.
Okay.
Pretty. I mean, it's very durable. And
I don't. You also remind me of something else we didn't talk about. Friends in the rest of the country all seem to have to use dew protection. I never have in Arizona. I don't know if any of you guys see any need for it.
very rare.
It's so dry. It's beautiful that you can go all night and you have zero dew accumulating on your telescope. But like Alan said, you know the temperature drops quick enough that if you've got an electronic focuser, it's got to do its thing fairly frequently because the temperature dips dramatically.
Well, that's why we get an EAF.
Yep. I have mine I used to have it every 2 degrees centigrade drop. I switched it to every hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use the dew shield on mine, but only to act as a lens hood, just to keep ambient light out.
Yeah. We're blessed with a good sky down there. We're generally blessed with good weather, and thank heavens for low humidity. Anybody else got any questions or things I forgot to address that might help a new visitor?
I just want to tell everybody it's an amazing facility, and if you haven't been there, you definitely have to go. I mean, it's just it's amazing that we have such a facility available to us, and I highly recommend it. And one other thing that Kevin did talk about, it gets windy down there, and it doesn't take a lot of wind to be really painful down there. You know, when it gets really cold at night, a 5-mile-an-hour wind just cuts through you like a knife.
Yep.
So just be prepared for that. Bring some wind protection. That's all.
And like I said, my typical stay previously was three nights because beyond that I had too big a sleep deficit. I think I'm probably going to shift to 4 nights in the future because the dorm rooms give you, a whole bunch of advantages there. If you're going to do the drive, I mean, for me, I live on the west side of town. It's an hour and 45 minutes down there. So the drive's not bad. The gas cost isn't bad. It's that constant sense of, as you get close to CAC, what did I forget? And so, I don't want to be the guy that pulls in there without the counterweights. But it's also such a nice community of people. There's some really good and fun conversations that happen at 2 a.m. in the morning out there. And there's a lot of expertise. It's not just if you forgot hardware. If you're guiding glitches, they're pretty high odds that somebody else knows how to solve that. It's a nice sense of team and community down there. Well, thank you folks for bearing with me.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. That was a good overview of what someone's going to need if they're going to travel down there. I did have one question for you. Are the bunkhouses heated at all?
Well, the time I was there, which I think was April or May, I'm not sure we needed heat, but
They are both heated and cooling. It's a heating and cooling unit for each room, and there's a thermostat in each room, so you can set, just like at home, you set it to heat or cool.
Perfect.
Okay.
And that's something I didn't talk about. In addition to sort of at least in my case, an inflatable camping pad. Bring a really light sleeping bag, your favorite blanket from your childhood. You need, something like that to cover yourself with. I like to sleep cold, so I'm happy sleeping at 50 or 60 degrees, but not everybody is. So it's nice that it's adjustable. I would, if it's 20 degrees outside, I'd probably dial the room temperature down so you don't face too much thermal shock when you go back outside at 2 a.m.
Yeah, our CAC director has suggested limitations, like not set the thermostat in the wintertime to, 85 or something,
yeah.
stuff like that. So
Yeah.
he has guidelines.
No, it's almost all the comforts of home down there. It's really nice.
Any suggestions on where to get an affordable inflatable pad?
REI is obviously a source. Walmart carries some. What's that sporting store that's in town? Summit Hut will obviously have some, though they tend to be pretty pricey. But there's a lot of stuff on the Amazon. I've been happy with the REI stuff that I've got.
Are those twin size beds or bunks?
Yes, they're twins.
Sorry, go ahead, Conrad.
No, I was just gonna say, I can't remember the dimensions of a twin, but we have a few people that are rather tall, and it doesn't accommodate them. We do have a member that goes down there at 6'8", I believe. So,
is there any preference from the CAC managers that people bring sheets or stuff like that? The first time we sort of did the dry run, we weren't necessarily expecting to use them, so nobody came prepared.
the last time I went, I had sheets. I brought like a mattress pad, and then I had the sheets and stuff like that. I decided to try it with sheets and a blanket as opposed to a sleeping bag. So.
Yeah, well, actually, the sleeping bag was unzipped and kind of half draped over me, so the sleeping bag, in my case, was overkill. One thing that I will probably bring is, because when I was there in the spring, there was no other furniture in the sleeping rooms other than the beds. I've got, different from my observing table, I've got just a little, 20-inch square folding camp table that rolls up, into a very small package. But it's almost nice to have a little nightstand to put your phone on, your headlamp on, your glasses, things like that. That makes the dorm room feel a little more livable.
There is a chair and one of those little folding things that you put your luggage on, like in a motel room.
Yeah.
We now have shelves not in a closet, but we have a couple of shelves. We have a shelf in each room.
Oh, perfect. You guys have really done a lot of work over the summer then.
Yeah, we've been busy.
Okay. Well, thanks, Kevin, for that. And I think that was a pretty good discussion. I have a couple of reminders for everyone. Again, we're always looking for images for the bulletin. And a lot of you have been very helpful in sending me images. But a lot of you still post your images on AstroBin. And it's sometimes very difficult to copy those images if they're on AstroBin. So again, if you'd like to have your images show up in the monthly bulletin, you need to send me a copy. Hope something on the order of 10 megabytes or less usually works really well. Sometimes I can copy the image when you post it on AstroBin, but many times I can't. So if you're wondering why your great image of M31 didn't show up in the bulletin, that could be the reason. We're also working on the November workshop, and we've got some of the organization done and some volunteers already arranged to lead some discussions. And so you'll be hearing more about that in the next few weeks as we flesh out the rest of the agenda.
When is it planned? What date? Do you have a date for it?
November the 18th, the Oro Valley Public Library.
Okay.
And last but not least, we're always looking for topics for upcoming meetings. And so if you have a topic that you'd like to see addressed, or if you'd even better yet like to address and lead a discussion on, please let me know. And we'll put you on the schedule for sometime in the near future. So with that, I think any other topics or discussion that anyone needs to bring up?
Can I share something slightly off topic, but it really surprised me. My daughter, about 6 to 8 weeks ago, urged me to start doing Peloton Pilates classes. I was doing 10-minute classes. It's all I could tolerate. And I still can't fully get through a 20-minute class, 3 to 4 times a week. I had a number of weeks where I couldn't get outside. I took my mount, it's a Mach 1, outside the other day in pieces. And I said, this thing got lighter. It made a stunning difference.
Interesting.
So I just commend the idea to you.
Oh, okay.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and keep working out and you can get a bigger mount.
Exactly.
You may have seen in National Geographic that Pilates was developed in a prisoner of war camp during World War I, where the guy figured out that cats were in better shape than the prisoners because they stretched regularly. So the guy's name was Walter Pilates.
Oh,
Okay, with that, I'm going to end the recording and we'll see you all again next month. Thanks again.
take care, guys.
Thanks, everybody.